Hi everyone, welcome to this video which is part of the program development course assessment outlines, and this is an introduction into the assessment task 3 part A. And in this assessment task we will be looking at an assessment that's due in week 12, but you might want to start preparing for as soon as possible. There's two parts to part A. So there's part A, part 1 is a debriefing session on it, which is a video submission, and part 2 is a short answer questionnaire where you will provide some answers based on the learning content from week 9 through to week 13. Okay, so let's have a quick look at what's going to be required here. The assessment for task 3 is there'll be 4 total parts to the assessment. Part B and Part C will be due in week 13, and we'll deal with that in another video. But for now, we'll deal with assessment task 3, Part A, which is a simulated debriefing session with a colleague and short answer questionnaire. So let's have a read of the outline of the assessment. While on work placement, you're required to record a debriefing session with a work colleague at separate times and upload it for marking into the class space. Now, if you're not on a work placement, then you'll have to simulate that with a friend or a fellow student if you're in contact with another student, and upload a video. Still going to be required to upload a video. In the assessment instructions, before your session begins, make sure that you say your full name, your student ID number, and the subject and assessment number, which would be assessment 3A, part 1, which is the video submission. There's some instructions for uploading the video here, and it tells you how to upload that. So let's have a look at what the video should be. Okay, so you need to have completed all 3 parts of assessment 3, part A, part B, part C, to be assessed. So let's be clear about this. The video recording must ensure that the teacher is able to have a full view of the colleague and the student case supervisor. So you will be doing a simulated debriefing session where your where your colleague is playing the part of somebody that you are debriefing, and you'll be supporting that person. If this is not possible and you're due to your camera equipment, you and your colleague need to be visible from the waist up. That'll be fine. We're not really serious about seeing that, but you'll have to be trying to do a simulated debriefing session. And we have to clearly be able to hear you and your colleague. Most mobile phones these days are capable of doing this, so we're not too worried about that not working. But if it's not visible, if you're not visible and we can't hear you, you might be asked to resubmit, so be aware of that. So you'll need to check the recordings as well. So let's have a look at part of simulated debriefing session. You are to identify an example of a critical incident or stressful situation that has happened in your work placement. You are to schedule and conduct a structured debriefing interview with the person who has experienced this critical incident or stress-related situation. Identify the additional support person may need and provide information on appropriate referral as to your organization's guidelines. So you'll need to ask one of your work colleagues who has some experience in the critical incident if they might play part of the scenario for you to select. Otherwise, as I said, a friend or a fellow student at ACAP, whoever is available to you to play the part. If you're unable to identify a real critical incident, you can select one of the scenarios outlined below and ask a colleague to play the debrief session with you. Be aware that you need to provide a brief written description of that scenario. So if you're not using one of the case studies, you'll need to write a separate understanding of what has happened in the other scenario you're using. If you're going to change the scenario, that's the case study, there's 1 or 2 case study scenarios, you need to be very clear and write that down. So here are the 2 case study scenarios here. You've become aware that a work colleague, Sarah, of Lebanese background, who is a single mum, is not coping with her work and have to look after and is having to look after 3 children under the age of 8. Her husband has passed away 2 years previously while traveling to Lebanon. During the work week, one of your colleagues sadly died due to cancer. Sarah's particularly not coping well with the news. She's approached you for some debriefing counselling. So you will have a session where you will take what you've learned from weeks 9, 10, 11, 12 and give feedback to Sarah in relation to her situation. Now, in scenario 2, one of your work colleagues, Raja, who has recently arrived from India, confides in you that they are being unfairly treated by another worker who complains to the manager about their work, and according to your colleague is making up some stories which appear to be untrue. Your colleague is stating they are not sleeping at night. You yourself have observed that the person seems to be tired all the time, seems not to be managing his or her job particularly well, and is not completing tasks. You also have observed some bullying behaviour towards the colleague from another worker, and you'll be debriefing that worker as well. So part A, you'll take either a real situation, scenario 1 or scenario 2. In the real situation, you will write down what is the situation. You need to write, 100 words or so, like this amount of words, explaining the circumstances and how you're debriefing the person. You'll need to, in the video, debrief the person, provide information, referrals, listen to the person, demonstrate some micro listening skills and micro communication skills for engaging and supporting that colleague, and then referring them through to the EAP program that is appropriate through the workplace. Right, so that's a new video that, look, somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes, 7 minutes, that'll be okay, Don't go under 7 minutes, you probably won't have enough time. And part 2, here are some short answers. What steps would you take to monitor the stress levels of a fellow worker? Well, you need to answer some of these questions yourself, but, you might schedule another meeting with them. You might make sure that they're able to check in with you if they're not feeling supported. You might need to refer the matter on to a manager if that's the case. You might be observing their work as well to make sure that they're able to manage their duties. And how might you address issues of diversity in the workplace? Well, in case of issues of diversity, you might apply the understanding of the equal opportunities policy of your organization. So have a look there and make sure that you're understanding of what the equal opportunity policy is in your workplace and how that might apply to a particular circumstance, particularly in relation to something like scenario 2 with the workplace bullying and the person being of an Indian background. So the Lebanese situation might also be something that's related to cultural problems around issues of death. And certainly with Aboriginality, for example, the idea of death is somewhat taboo to discuss dead people after they have passed away. So you might need to be particularly aware of how things are going there. Discuss briefly how excessive stress or the critical incident is impacting the worker on their performance. So explain how the worker that you're talking to is not meeting their responsibilities in the workplace, and how where they're remiss in their duties. And right, I suppose basically that's it. Prepare a brief plan outlining the 6 steps for debriefing, for a debriefing session. These are to be found in week 10, week 9, week 10, and week 11. You'll be able to find that information. And prepare, so you'll need to write down all 6 steps, and you'll be able to pretty much verbatim copy that. You don't need to write anything new there. And describe how you'll conduct a debriefing session in terms of the location. What's the best location to have a sensitive chat? Sample questions you might use to raise the topics that you need to raise with the worker, and what 3 specific debriefing techniques might you use to encourage further exploration of emotions and experiences to assist in reflecting on issues. Identify if there's any risk to yourself or others as a result of the situation. Briefly summarize the outcome of the debriefing sessions in accordance with the organization's standards. How have you met the standards? You need to explain that. And briefly discuss how you might provide ongoing support. So briefly discuss how you might provide ongoing support, including any referral for specific assistance. So you might need to write down a number of strategies you would use to ensure that you're providing ongoing support to the client, to your colleague in this situation. Provide a brief summary of how you'll monitor the well-being of the worker. So think about how you're going to check in with that worker. 11, how you might ensure that your organization prevents these types of situations occurring. So this is a bit of a weird question. If somebody's died in the workplace, how are they going to prevent that occurring? But really, you've got to think about how are they ensuring that support is provided, and that support recognizes where employees are not meeting their responsibilities in the workplace, and can identify that that's a reason of emotional trauma that's occurring for them, for whatever reason that might be, and that there's an appropriate level of support is available. And how they will provide some examples of how you would assess your own stress levels within the workplace. What do you notice about yourself? What is it that you do that says, yeah, you're not coping very well in certain situations, and how you monitor that in relation to how you feel, and how, if you're not feeling very well, how are you going to respond to that? So what processes would you employ if you feel that you're not coping with the situation emotionally? Whether you're a victim of bullying, whether you're, you might be burned out in terms of just finding it difficult to keep going in. You might find that you're not feeling very valued. You might find that you're getting unreasonably upset about certain situations which in the past you used to deal with. So you could talk about those sorts of situations and how you would follow through and address that. And identify 2 strategies you would put in place to improve your knowledge and skills in managing critical incidents or stress in the workplace. So 2 strategies might be that you might maintain ongoing awareness of best practice in working with individuals and addressing problems in the workplace. And another strategy might be that you would ensure that you engage in regular supervision, and that where you're feeling unhappy about something, you're able to actually address that problem with some colleagues in a way that's productive and positive, rather than allowing it to get to a point where relationships are breaking down and you're no longer coping with the responsibilities of your work. Right, so look, we're going to end the meeting here because this was that assessment 3A, parts 1 and 2. So come back for another video for the assessments due in week 13, which will be assessment 3 part B and assessment 3 part C, which will be a report and another short answer response section on the same area, which is working and supporting colleagues in the workplace. Thanks for your time. I look forward to seeing you again. Bye.